Maggie Foster never paid much attention to her shadow. It was always there, a silent companion trailing behind her. It stretched and shrank with the changing light, a flat, unremarkable silhouette. To Maggie, it was simply a consequence of sunlight, a visual echo of her physical form. One chilly evening, Maggie was walking home from work. The sun was setting, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. Streetlights flickered to life, casting long, dancing shadows on the sidewalk. Maggie, lost in thought, didn't notice her own shadow stretching out before her. As she walked, a strange feeling washed over her. It started as a prickling sensation at the back of her neck, a feeling of being watched. She quickened her pace, her heart beginning to thump a little faster. The feeling intensified, a weight settling on her chest like an invisible hand. Then, she heard it. A whisper, faint and indistinct, seeming to come from the very air around her. It was a low murmur, barely audible above the city's hum. She stopped, holding her breath, straining to hear. The whisper came again, closer this time and undeniably directed at her. "Maggie!" the voice whispered, her name a hushed rasp that sent shivers down her spine. Maggie froze, fear gripping her like a vice, her heart pounding in her chest. She whipped around, searching for the source of the voice, her eyes wide with terror. The street was deserted, the only movement the swaying branches of trees in the evening breeze, casting eerie shadows on the ground. "Who's there?" she called out, her voice trembling, barely above a whisper. Silence. Only the distant hum of traffic broke the stillness, making the quiet even more oppressive. She took a hesitant step back, her eyes darting around, searching for any sign of movement. The hair on the back of her neck stood on end, a primal response to the unseen threat. There was a wrongness to the air, a sudden chill that had nothing to do with the weather but everything to do with the presence she felt. Then as she stared at the ground, she saw it. Something that made her blood run cold. Her shadow, usually a flat, unremarkable form, was darker now, its edges seeming to writhe and ripple as if alive. And from it she heard the whisper again, clearer this time, filled with an unnerving intimacy that made her skin crawl. "You can't hide from me, Maggie," the voice taunted, dripping with malice. Panic welled up inside Maggie, her mind racing with fear and confusion. She backed away from her own shadow, her breath catching in her throat, her chest tightening with dread. This was madness, impossible. Shadows didn't speak, didn't whisper secrets, didn't come alive. "Leave me alone!" she cried, her voice high with terror, echoing down the empty street. The shadow, however, only seemed to grow bolder, its presence more menacing. It stretched towards her, its edges flickering like flames, reaching out with a sinister intent. The whispers grew louder, transforming into a torrent of accusations, each one more damning than the last. "You remember, Maggie. You can't forget," the voice insisted, each word a dagger to her heart. The voice was a chilling echo of her own, twisted and filled with a strange malice that made her blood run cold. It spoke of past mistakes, of guilt and shame, of things she had tried desperately to bury deep within herself, things she had hoped to forget. Maggie clapped her hands over her ears, squeezing her eyes shut, desperate to block out the voice, to silence the torment. But it was no use. The voice was inside her head, relentless and unforgiving. The whispers seemed to penetrate her very being, digging their claws into her deepest fears, dragging her into a dark abyss of her own making. Driven to the brink, Maggie sought help, feeling the weight of her troubles pressing down on her. She confided in friends, but they dismissed her story as stress-induced hallucinations, leaving her feeling even more isolated. Desperate and with nowhere else to turn, she sought professional help, hoping for some relief. That's how she found Dr. Simmons, a therapist specializing in anxiety and trauma, known for his empathetic approach. Dr. Simmons listened patiently as Maggie recounted her experience, her voice trembling, her hands twisting in her lap, every word a struggle. When she was finished, Dr. Simmons remained silent for a moment, his gaze thoughtful, as if piecing together a complex puzzle. "Maggie," he began, his voice calm and reassuring, "our minds are complex mechanisms, often beyond our full understanding. Often, when we experience deep-seated guilt or trauma, our minds find ways to manifest these feelings externally, creating scenarios that feel very real." He explained that what Maggie was experiencing, while unusual, wasn't entirely unheard of in the realm of psychological phenomena. He spoke of the subconscious, of repressed memories and emotions that could surface in unexpected ways, influencing our perceptions and experiences. His words, though spoken with kindness and understanding, offered little comfort to Maggie, who still felt the weight of her experiences. The whispers continued, haunting her waking hours, seeping into her dreams, a constant reminder of her unresolved fears. Section 5. Buried Guilt. Under Dr. Simmons' guidance, Maggie began to delve into her past. Through therapy sessions, she revisited memories she had long suppressed, memories she had tried desperately to forget. It was a painful process, like picking at a scabbed wound. She remembered her childhood, the constant fighting between her parents, the feeling of being invisible, unheard. She remembered her teenage years, the reckless choices she had made, the consequences she had tried to outrun. And then it surfaced. The memory she had buried deepest, the source of her guilt and shame. It was an accident, a moment of carelessness with irreversible consequences, a mistake that had haunted her ever since, a weight she had carried in the silence of her heart. The shadow's whispers, she realized, were her own thoughts, her own guilt and fear, given a voice by her troubled mind. Section 6. Facing the Darkness. The realization was both terrifying and liberating. Terrifying because it meant the whispers were not some external entity, but a part of her own psyche. Liberating because it meant that she and she alone had the power to silence them. The next time the whispers started, echoing her guilt and shame, Maggie stood tall. She closed her eyes and faced her shadow, her heart pounding in her chest. "I hear you," she whispered back, her voice trembling but resolute. The whispers faltered, surprised by her sudden defiance. "You are a part of me," she continued, her voice gaining strength, "but you don't control me." She spoke of her guilt, her remorse, acknowledging the pain she had caused. She spoke of her desire to atone, to forgive herself, to find peace. Section 7. The Power of Forgiveness. The whispers didn't disappear overnight. They lingered, like embers refusing to be extinguished. But Maggie persevered. She continued to confront her shadow, to acknowledge her past, to seek forgiveness, not from others, but from herself. She began to understand that true forgiveness was not about forgetting or condoning past mistakes, but about accepting them, learning from them, and allowing herself to move forward. As she started to forgive herself, she noticed a change in her shadow. It was still there, a constant companion, but it was no longer a menacing figure. Its edges seemed softer now, its darkness less absolute. And the whispers? They were still there, but they were different. They no longer taunted or accused. Instead, they spoke of acceptance, of understanding, of the strength that comes from confronting one's demons. Section 8. Embracing the Light. It was a long and arduous journey, but slowly, steadily, Maggie began to heal. The shadows still flickered at the edge of her vision, but they no longer held the power to terrify. She had faced her darkness, embraced her flaws, and emerged stronger, more resilient. She learned that the path to redemption wasn't about erasing the past, but about learning to live with it, to integrate it into the tapestry of her being. Maggie continued to see Dr. Simmons, but the sessions were different now. They spoke less of fear and guilt, and more about hope and resilience. They spoke about the future, a future where her past no longer defined her, a future filled with possibilities. Section 9. Conclusion. The Shadow's Embrace. Years later, Maggie stood on that same street corner, where so many memories had been made and lost, the setting sun casting long shadows across the pavement, painting the world in hues of orange and gold. She smiled, a genuine, heartfelt smile, one that spoke of inner peace and newfound strength, as she looked down at her shadow, a familiar silhouette that had been with her through thick and thin. It was still there, a silent companion, always present but no longer a source of fear, a reminder of her past, of the trials she had endured, and the battles she had won, of the darkness she had faced and overcome, emerging stronger and more resilient. But it no longer frightened her. Instead, it was a testament to her journey. It was a part of her, intertwined with her very being, just as her capacity for love, for compassion, and for understanding, for joy, for forgiveness, and for embracing life in all its complexities, was a part of her. She had come to realize that every experience, every emotion, she had learned that true strength lay not in denying the darkness, but in acknowledging it, integrating it, and ultimately transcending it. This was her true power. The whispers were still there too, echoing softly in the recesses of her mind. But they were different now. They no longer haunted her. Instead, they guided her. They were whispers of hope, of resilience, of a future filled with promise, of the unwavering human spirit that could find light even in the deepest darkness, a beacon of strength and courage. They were the whispers of her own voice, a voice that had been silenced for too long, a voice that had found its strength, its clarity, and its purpose, its peace, its redemption, and its place in the world.